Sports Illustrated calls him a triple threat. Super Horse, says Newsweek. Super Horse, says Time Magazine. An alert and beautiful horse, says CBS. And most racing fans agree. That horse, named Secretariat, is the reason why one of the greatest crowds in horse racing history has turned out here at Belmont Park in New York to see if history is indeed in the air. I'm Jack Whitaker, and welcome to the 105th running of the Belmont Stakes.
Frankie, come in with number 3. We'll bring in the last one now.
From Belmont Park in New York, CBS Television Sports presents the 105th running of the Belmont Stakes, third jewel of the Triple Crown of Racing.
The Triple Crown is an odd phrase with its suggestion of a three-headed monarch, but what it actually refers to is the feat of a 3-year-old racehorse in remaining in top condition for a period of 5 weeks, winning the Kentucky Derby on the first Saturday in May at 1.25 miles, going on to the Preakness in Baltimore at 1 3/16. And the last jewel of this crown is today's race, the Belmont Stakes, at the championship distance of 1.5 miles. This ancient pine tree above me, which Belmont preserves with a great deal of care, is part of racing's care for tradition and age. And the tradition of the Triple Crown began with Sir Barton in 1919, has gone through 8 holders of the crown. There hasn't been one before today since Citation in 1948, and that dearth of winners is something that perhaps Jack Whitaker can tell you about now.
Thank you, Woody. The biggest reason for the paucity of Triple Crown winners in 25 years is the fact that the population of the thoroughbred has grown tremendously here in the United States. In Citation's year, about 8,000 foals were dropped every year. In this year of Secretariat, 26,000 foals were dropped. Another reason is that in the old days, the cast of characters were the same in the Derby, the Preakness, and in the Belmont. Nowadays, horses will lay off the Derby and the Preakness, be lightly raced and very fresh when it comes Belmont time. The Belmont Stakes itself is distinguished from the first 2 races of the Triple Crown by 2 features. The first is, because it is the last race, it puts a premium on the fitness of a horse. And second, it is the distance. The Belmont is run at the true Derby distance of 1.5 miles, the distance of the British Derby, where all this began back in the 18th century. Since Citation won the Triple Crown in 1948, 7 horses have come to the Belmont as Secretariat comes today. That is, they had won the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness and were taking dead aim at the Belmont. Canyonero II and Majestic Prince perhaps were not fit horses the day their Belmont was run. In 1958, there was Tim Tam coming to the Belmont with solid credentials. But as they turned for home, Tim Tam, the horse on the left, began to make his move on the leader, Cavan, and then he broke his leg. Watch now as he swerves in and out. Cavan went on to win by 6 lengths, but the gritty Tim Tam held on, and in one of the most courageous efforts in sports, got 2nd place, running the last part of the race on 3 legs. For other horses, the last 1/4 mile did them in. In 1966, the well-bred Kauai King led the race after 1.25 miles. But watch now as they head for home down that long last 1/4 mile. Amberoid takes the lead from him. Then Buffalo pulls past him. And eventually the son of Native Dancer finished 4th. Yes, the Belmont is different. It is a true test of champions. And if you're looking for a place where it may be won or lost today, you might try that last 1/4 mile. There may be some people who do not know what or whose Secretariat is at this time. People who have been marooned on Pacific Islands or lost in Amazonian jungles. But for those of you who may have just gotten to know him in the last week or 10 days, here is a brief biographical sketch. First of all, you must know that he is quite the handsomest of horses to come along in decades. Secondly, he was voted Horse of the Year as a 2-year-old. an unprecedented event, unheard of, since that award always went to older horses. If that wasn't enough to distinguish him from his peers, Secretariat was syndicated for $6,080,000 before he raced as a 3-year-old. Not only was that unheard of before, it had scarcely been dreamt. Apparently untouched by the heavy weight of gold draped around his handsome withers, Secretariat began his 3-year career winning 2 races in memorable fashion, busting through horses like a fullback in the Bayshore, and then taking the Gotham by tying the track record at every post. But then came a long gray afternoon at Aqueduct 2 weeks before the Kentucky Derby, when Secretariat indicated that maybe he was not quite one with the gods, when he finished a lackluster 3rd in the Wood Memorial, the first smudge on his immaculate linen. But that linen went clean again at the Kentucky Derby. Here he comes now as they round the far turn. Secretariat on the outside and coming up to the leader, Sham. Secretariat in the blue and white checks. Sham on the inside. And there they are, head to head as they come down the stretch. Now Secretariat pulls away and leaves Sham behind as Pink Eye still driving Sham, and Turcotte now knowing he has the race won. The fastest Derby ever run and the fastest final quarter every run as we see that big stride of Secretariat. 2 weeks later at the Preakness, he moved differently. Dead last as they came down by the clubhouse turn. Turcotte steered him to the outside, and at this point, the big horse decided he wanted to move, and move he did as Turcotte led him. Watch him pass the horses. Moving quickly now. That is Écolitage on the lead, number 6, and at this point, Secretariat went ahead, took the lead, which he never relinquished. Coming down the stretch, Sham came at him, but again, Sham did not have enough to catch Secretariat. Again, Pink Eye driving Sham, and Ronnie Turcotte almost in a rocking chair as the big stride of Secretariat took him home in the second best Preakness time ever. In the 2 weeks since the Preakness, Secretariat has become a personality outside the thoroughbred business. And he has made the blue and white block of his owner's Meadow stable as easily recognizable as a CBS eye. A small stable, it has delivered tremendous quality out of very little quantity, and has perhaps given horse racing the needed boost. 4 other horses are here to see that Secretariat does not take the Triple Crown today. To tell you about them and to run down the field, here is Chick Anderson.
Thank you, Jack, and here is our small but very good field for today's Belmont. First of all, you'll have to notice that there was a late scratch in this race. Originally an entry, Nightly Dawn was taken out of the race this morning. His owner and his trainer decided not to run him, primarily because the track was not muddy, something they had hoped for, and secondly, because they intend to race in the Ohio Derby next Saturday. The other half of that entry is 1A Sham, and you should know Sham from his valiant efforts in the Preakness and the Kentucky Derby. And once again, the rider will be Lafitte Pincay Jr., who is here from California. One of the leading riders in the country has them out again today. 2, well, that's Secretariat, and the story there is, of course, Meadow Stud, Lucian Lauren, and Ron Turcotte. Number 3 is Private Smiles. You haven't seen him in the Preakness or in the Kentucky Derby. Private Smiles was a bit late developing, but seems to be coming along very strongly now. He's the son of Herbiger, a true distance horse. Will be ridden today by Dan Gargan, and Private Smiles is very likely the horse will trail the field and make an effort to catch everybody in the final half mile. We'll talk to Danny Gargan in a moment and find out if that's the case. Number 4 is My Gallant. My Gallant raced in the Kentucky Derby, not particularly well, had a bit of trouble in the larger field, however. My Gallant will be ridden by Angel Cordero Jr., and My Gallant is likely to show speed. He won here in New York just a week ago, showing speed against older horses, in fact being in front all of the way. The final horse in the field is number 5, Twice a Prince, who has Braulio Baeza. Twice a Prince had some problems in the Kentucky Derby, but they were before the race. So we'll probably take a look at Twice a Prince in a moment and maybe talk to Braulio Baeza about the problems that you have in the starting gate occasionally. And now I hear Jack O'Hara, the clerk of scales here at Belmont Park, has called for the riders to come and check their weights. This is a normal thing. As you know, everyone carries 126 pounds. This is Lafitte Pincay Jr., riding Sham, a man who has a big job today. Lafitte, can I ask you to stop for just a moment? You've had You shot at Secretariat twice. Today you get a shot to run him a little longer, 1.5 miles. Do you think this will help your horse?
Well, I think my horse going to run a good race again. I don't know if I can beat the other horse. I don't know if he helped my horse either, but we're going to try.
Okay, Lafitte.
Right,
thank you very much. And now more riders are coming into the room. Next in is jockey Ron Turcotte and the very familiar silks of Meadow Stud.
Put 1.5 pounds and go.
And the weight now corrected and checked out. Ron, today's the day. You're the first rider who's had a chance to ride a Triple Crown in many a year. Are you feeling the weight a little bit, or do you have so much confidence that it just doesn't matter?
No, it does matter. I mean, it's a horse race. It's another race. We win the other two, but it's just another race. I mean...
What do you think today? Do you look for a fast pace today? Do you feel like you'll have to be off the lead? You look for a slower pace, or have you had any thoughts before the race?
No, I don't. I have no idea what it's going to be, and I won't know till I get open till we go first quarter.
I'm sure you're glad that you've got a 5-horse field, though.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Okay, Ron, and best of luck. The next rider in being called to the scales is jockey Danny Gargan, who's riding in his first Belmont Stakes, and Danny is aboard Private Smiles, the C.B. Whitney entry in the race. And as I mentioned earlier, probably will be a horse that will come from far off the pace.
That's fine.
The weight's corrected for jockey Dan Gargan. And Dan, do you have a moment? I know you want to come off the pace, certainly, today. How far? Do you think you'll be last in this field?
Well, I'm just going to ride him away from, just let him run away from there and get him to relax and go from there and hope I got more left than anybody.
Hope to back up to you. Okay, Dan, thank you very much. And Angel Cordero is being called to the scales now. Very colorful silks here of Arthur Appleton, a great big apple on the front. And this horse, of course, was in the Kentucky Derby and the Bluegrass Stakes. Won the Bluegrass Stakes, but a bit of a problem in the Kentucky Derby, or rather was second in the Bluegrass. A bit of a problem in the Derby, and tremendous effort here in his last race. Angel, did you ride My Gallant when he was in front all the way this last time?
Yeah, last week.
Do you think he'll show speed today?
Well, I don't know. He probably shows speed because they're long of the race. But I think he'll run either way.
All right. Thanks very much. And here is Braulio Baeza now checking his weight. And Braulio Baeza has the tough job of riding Twice a Prince today. Braulio, in the Kentucky Derby, Twice a Prince had a bit of a problem in the starting gate. Do you anticipate you'll have, or are you thinking now about what the problem could be?
Well, I believe the problem with this horse has been corrected because they have been schooling all this past week, and I believe he'll behave.
All right, then that takes care of Twice a Prince, and thank you very much. Good luck today. And that's it here in the jockeys' quarters, as most of the jockeys have now checked out, and we're ready for the Belmont Stakes.
Woody, this is number 1A, fine big bay colt, Sham. And he looks none the worse for wear, but wear he has had. Several hard races, of course, the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. I noticed the astute trainer, Frank Martin, has brought him over here in cold water bandages that you see on his ankles, Woody. They give good tightness to the skin, and they keep the legs cool on a hot day like this. And
cold water bandages would help us, too, at this moment.
I think we could use them. And, of course, he has the hind bandages not run down, but removable bandages so he won't kick himself in the paddock. Frank, your horse looks marvelous. You've kept him in great condition, and I congratulate you for it. I wish you the very best of luck and admire you for trying so hard with him. And he's a trier, too, isn't he, Frank?
He certainly has an eye of fire.
He's been a game horse. Frank, I wouldn't consider him uncomfortable. It's just a very warm day.
No, he's comfortable. He is comfortable. He's a little hard. I'm very hard myself.
It's just what Woody was saying. Anybody that isn't warm today doesn't get warm. Thank you, Frank.
He's comfortable.
Yes, I think he is, too. And I notice you brought a sponge and a bucket over here just to give him a little cool water.
I give a little cool around on the body, too.
Yes, it does. A little body brace helps him. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Woody, he looks like a million, doesn't he?
He does look like a million, but unfortunately in this next stall, to which we'll come in a moment, is a horse who looks like 6 million with 80,000 thrown in for dessert, because this one here with the great rounded rear end you see facing you is Secretariat.
Well, facing me he isn't, but that's the privilege that trainers have. I'm sure Lucian Lauren felt that he'd be a little better facing the paddock crowd than facing this crowd out here, and you can't tell until you try to react to a horse.
Well,
Now,
as a celebrity, I think he just likes to look out and see his crowd.
you'll notice, Woody, as they're putting this saddle on, these riders would normally be able to do, as they say in track parlance, about 114 pounds. Today, they get to enjoy a luxury. To do 126, they can use the largest saddle they have, and some Pony Express-like pouches that have to be put underneath the saddle cloth, as you know, to make up the extra weight and give them all the 126 pounds they have to carry.
There is an endless technical debate we'll spare you as to live weight versus dead weight, but one thing we're sure of, they will all carry 126 pounds because this is a race with scale weights for age. They carry what their age should carry.
Well, Willie Shoemaker, of course, has been belied that live weight situation because when he rides in a race like this, 25 pounds of it is dead weight.
Lucian Lauren at the moment is pulling the second girth tight over there. When he does, we'll try to get a moment with him. In the meantime, you are seeing what was described by Frank last week as the horse's only weakness, that rather sharp slope at the back of the powerful hindquarters. Having a little trouble with that second girth, but now I think Lucian has got it and is tightening. It would be a terrible thing at a race for over $100,000 to have the saddle slip, so they are tightening it up, and there's a rubber girth underneath, isn't there, Frank?
Correct. There are two for safety's sake, and so many of the horses that he runs against seem to be getting this view that we're getting of Secretariat here, Woody. There's Lucian.
Lucian.
Beleaguered and working. He has to check now to see, and
check the girth.
Sometimes you take a little pinch of skin when you put that over girth, and it behooves the trainer to make sure that isn't the case.
Lucian is now getting a kiss from Mrs. Tippett, the breeder, and he's now disappearing around to have a last look at the front of his horse.
He gets the kiss, and Secretariat gets the blinkers, which they're now putting in place.
Yes, those are the, what are those, half blink? No, those are...
Those are half blinkers,
Half
Woody. We
blinkers.
discussed this with the horse I ran yesterday. Yes, they're semi-cups or whatever nomenclature you want to put on them.
They look very good in photographs of him
And
anyway.
he takes so many pictures with them.
And he is now having the last adjustment to his bridle. I guess he's ready. Lucian has given him a slap on the neck to indicate
He is
he
ready.
thinks he's ready. And he's now coming round here and watching him go out a bit. I think, Frank, you can get in and say a word to him, I think, can't you?
Lucian, the heat doesn't seem to be bothering him too much, does it?
No, I think it's one of his calmer races since I've been starting this.